Welcome to the Creative Coding Workshop. I'm Jack. I'm one of the IM instructor. I've been working for NYUAD for 4 years, and I've been supporting IM classes, doing workshops. This workshop particular focus on coding for art. First, what is creative coding? Well, at least to me, creative coding is writing code for any kind of creative purposes. What we will be doing today is more about writing code to create an image, but you can be writing code to make a robot that perform. For instance, one of the IM faculty, Michael Shilo, is teaching a performing robot class. To me, that's also creative coding. You're writing code to program the robot, but the robot is doing something creative. So writing code to do anything that's for any kind of creative purposes. To me, that's what creative coding is. You draw with like a paintbrush or with a pencil, but when we do creative coding, essentially you are using code as a media to create, as a tool and media to create create something that's creative and expressive. For this, there are a couple of platforms that are popular. So there's processing, there's openFrameworks, and what we will be doing today is P5.js. So they are based on different languages, and with those different languages, it comes with pros and cons. So for instance, with C++, you can get very high performance. So with the same type of computers, you can have better performance. You can create more complicated visuals. However, with P5.js, since it is in a browser, so it's less powerful and with less performance. However, because it is in a browser, you literally just need a browser, open a browser, you can start coding. Okay, so that's the reason why we want to use P5.js today, especially for beginners. I highly recommend. I actually use P5.js to create sketches daily, also posted on Instagram. So here are a couple of examples. Let's see, which one do I want to show? Maybe like this one. Most of what I create are video. So essentially, it's exported as different frames, and then I combine them as a video. And there's some more flowery sketches like this. So this is the type of stuff that you can create with, creative coding or P5.js more specifically. Without further ado, let's get to the real thing. Let's get to the coding. Okay. So P5.js, the official website is p5js.org. So if you open this link, you can find information about this. You can download it and use it on your own computer. But today we will be using the web editor, which means it's basically a website where you can just edit your code. So in order to access editor on their website, you can click on editor, and it directs you to this page. If you are using this for the first time, I would highly recommend register for an account. And that's because that's how you can save code. And if you, without an account, you can still use it. However, if you accidentally close it or anything crashes, you won't be able to have your code. You have to rewrite everything. There are documentation on the website to show you how you can also download it locally and run it on your own computer, or when you have no internet access. But today we will be using the web editor. Okay, and also back to the p5js.org official site, you can also see references on their site about all the functions and pretty much everything that this programming language or this library can do. So I will also be referred to that a couple of times. So first, let's just get familiarized with the interface. Just like any sort of code editor or your Word document, you have file where you can create files, save file, open files, like open all ones, or there are also some examples that you can check out. There's edit that automatically tidy the code, so it formatted so that it's easier to read. The basic find, replace, and there's sketch. You can add files, so you can add, sometimes you might need to use image, create folders. You can see your file structure here, but most likely we won't be needing that today. Okay, so you can turn it on and off over here in help. Okay, there's also a shortcut for the reference. And by the way, yeah, feel free to interrupt me at any time during the workshop. If you have any question at all, if there's anything that you're not following, let me know. And if you're logged in, this should show your username right here, change to different language. And then there's this gear icon where you can change the settings. So if you are, again, if you're using it for the first time, it's probably a light background. When I'm coding, looking at the screen for a very long time, I really like it being a dark background. Yeah, so it's just a little bit easier on my eye. So that's why I choose the dark background, different font sizes. By default, auto refresh is probably turned on. I highly recommend turn that off. Okay, and actually there's one other feature I recommend turn off is auto close brackets and quotes. So this, I personally like turning it off. Basically, if you have an opening bracket, it will automatically close it for you. I find it annoying, but you know, for those of you who know what you are doing, if you like it to turn it on, feel free to leave it on. And I'll set a name, workshop number 1. Getting started, so you can name, this is just name for this project. Okay. So first, what do we see? We see 2 functions here. Okay. One function, and how do I know they're a function? Because it literally says function right here. Yeah. So there's a function that's called setup, and then there's a function that's called draw. Okay. So just based on the name, you might know that setup is, you know, whenever you are, let's say you are drawing, setup is sort of the preparation process. You get your canvas, which whether it's a create canvas, you get your canvas or whatever material you're working with, you get your print brushes, you get everything ready. And then draw is where you actively drawing and maneuvering like the materials that you're working with. Okay, so let's actually just give it a try with all the code. Let's give it a try and try to run this. This triangle is for running the code. Okay, looks like there's really just a white square, not a lot that's happening. But what is this 400, 400 referring to? It's the size of the canvas. So let's give it a try. I mean, there's 400, 400, so I don't know which one is width, which one is height. So what if I change the first number to 200? Okay, it's actually become narrower. Okay, so we know that the first value is actually the width. Okay, the second value, if I change to 100, then it becomes shorter. Okay, so the second value is the height. Okay, so that's create a canvas. So basically this function, this is also in programming to create canvas, this is also called a function. This function create a canvas for you. Okay, usually we won't really get into having multiple canvases, but usually you just need one canvas. Okay, so I'll keep it as 400, 400. Okay, and then background 220. Okay, what is that 220? Any guess? Color, yes. But is there just one number to represent color? Let's try change 220 to a different number, 10. Okay, it's almost black. What if I use 100? Okay, it's gray, but it's slightly lighter. What if it's 200? Okay, it's even lighter. What if I use 300? Okay, now it's white. Okay, so essentially this number, when you have one number, it's in grayscale. It's sort of the darkness, like in grayscale from 0 to 255. You use that number to describe how dark you want it to be. So 0 being black, okay, and 255 being white. And then you can use any color any sort of gray value that you like, any number in between, okay? And then what if I want to have more colors? What if I want to use like red, okay? Sorry? 3 numbers, great. 3 numbers, so 0, 0, 0. It's still black, and maybe 200, 0, 0. Okay, now it looks red. So by default, it's using RGB, and you know, all of our computers, most of the screens, essentially the colors consist of 3. We have three prime colors: red, green, and blue. So the 3 numbers here represent the brightness for each color. like how much red you want. Like if you're working with paint, how much paint of that color do you want? Yes?
Why can't we use the hex code for the color?
Yes, you can use hex code. However, in these functions, you are only supposed to enter numbers or variables. You are not supposed to put like the sort of pound sign, the hash key. Instead, you put it in quotes. Okay, so if you want to use hash color, so let's see, one thing that you can use is if you just open Google and search color picker. Okay, and then I don't know. Oh, yeah, and then you can pick any color here that you like. For instance, if I want pick like a green, and there's a couple of options. There's RGB value, you can just copy and paste over there, or CMYK. There's option to switch to CMYK in P5, and then there's also hex. Okay, so you can copy that, go back to your code and paste it in here. So whenever you are using the hex value, just make sure that you have quotes, either single quote or double quote, have quotes around it. And now it should work, great. And for those of you who really hate numbers, there's even easier ones. If you use a quote, you can literally just put red. And if you put green, you get green. If you put like navy, it's navy. Okay, so you can also use named colors. There's like, if you Google, there's a named list of colors that you can use. Like a list of named colors that you can use. Okay, and for now, I'll just keep it as gray. Okay, so yeah, colors, there's multiple options. If you want to be precise, use the numbers. Otherwise, you can use the color names. Okay, so now we have a background. Maybe I'll do like a light gray. I think it's a little bit too dark for what I might want to do. Light gray, and it supports both American and English and British spelling, by the way. Okay, so now we have a canvas, and we were able to change the color of our canvas. What else would you want to do? Yeah, what kind of stuff you might want to draw? A circle, yes. Let's actually start with something even simpler. Let's start with a dot. Okay, so if you want to draw a point, you use a function that's called point. So you literally just type point, and so after the point, you put parentheses, and inside a point, what number do you need to know? Like, let's say if I just do point, and in processing, in P5.js, which is JavaScript, each line of statement needs to end with a semicolon. Okay. Sometimes even if you don't have it, it works because that's also why JavaScript is easy. It's quite loose about some of the rules. So like even if you don't have it, it knows that there's supposed to be a semicolon. But I highly recommend having that so that it doesn't confuse the computer or your browser. Okay. So if I just put point, it's not going to draw a point because it doesn't know where do I want to draw a point. Okay. So I need to give some numbers to specify. Also, speaking of accessibility, P5.js has the so-called friendly error messages. Okay, so it says P5. There's a flower. Start with a flower, and then P5.js says on line 7, point was expecting at least 1 arguments, but received only 0. Okay, so it's expecting some arguments. I'm not. Yeah. So friendly error message. So 1 value. So let's say 100, and then it says was expecting first parent. Okay, so now this is where it's a little. This message is probably a little more confusing, but essentially you need to know where the point is. So you want to have 2 numbers. In math we learn the Cartesian coordinates. So let's say 100, 100. Okay, I can't really see. It's actually already here. It's just super, super tiny. Okay, so how do I make it bigger? That's something called stroke. If you've ever used like Illustrator or other kind of vector-based software, there's stroke and fill. So stroke referring to sort of for whatever shapes is referring to the contour of that shape, and fill is whatever color that you're filling in. So for stroke, you can specify the thickness, but it's not called stroke thick, it's called stroke weight. And make sure we are using the so-called camel case, meaning starting from the second word, you use uppercase, you capitalize the word. Okay, so stroke weight. And one thing about programming is that you actually are not allowed to misspell anything. If you miss a letter, if you have the wrong casing, it will not work, and it's going to complain. Okay, and not all messages are going to be as friendly as P5.js. Sometimes it's going to scream. Okay, and so yeah, so weight, and it will be in pixels. So let's say 10 pixels. Now I can finally see this dot. Okay, everyone has a dot on their canvas. Yeah. Any questions so far? Everyone's following? Yeah, good. Great. So we have a dot. But why is that dot on the top left corner? Because in math, I learned the origin is at the bottom left. So 10, 10 is more like here. Why is it on top left? So, yes?
With the weight, is it 10 pixels or so is it like the diameter?
Yes. So 10 pixels, because technically it's for stroke. So if you're having a line, that's a thickness. So when it comes to a point, that's essentially the diameter. Okay. Yeah, and it's in pixels, 10 pixels diameter. Okay. And so it turns out in computer graphics, oops, let me save, right? Remember to save, Command S for Mac and Control S for PC. I'll save. I have actually wrote some code to demonstrate the coordinate system in computer graphics. Okay, and let's run this. Okay, here we go. And so essentially top left, it's really hard to get exactly the top left, but essentially, that's origin on top left, 0, 0. And then you can move it anywhere. Let's say over here, that's why when you draw a dot over here, if you click, so this would be 300, 100. Start with x-axis and then y-axis, okay? So the origin is top left, okay? And I will also be sharing the code, so if you're interested in see how I wrote this code, you can. So the bottom corner, okay? Yeah, everyone understand the coordinate system? Yes? Okay, let's get back to our code. Yeah, so that's why that point is 100, 100 is on top left corner because the 0, 0 starts on top left. Okay, so let's try to draw another point 200, 100. Okay, so there is another point that right next to it. What if I want to draw a point that's a little bit bigger? Then, so programming, in most cases, not all the time, but in most cases, it goes like line by line, sort of procedurally. So when you change the stroke weight to 10, all the rest of the code, or the rest of the stroke, including point, will be 10. So if I add stroke weight, let's say 20, and then again, everything that following that setting, it's a bigger point. It's a bigger point. Okay, yeah. And then someone asking about circle. So what do you need to draw a circle? What information do you need? Yes, radius. So besides the position, you actually also want to know radius. So let's say I want to draw it at 200, 200, and then the radius. And actually in this in P5.js, what you specify would be the diameter instead of the radius, if I remember it correctly. So 100. Okay, here we go. We have a circle that's 100. Yeah. Again, if I think the stroke weight is too much, I can just change it to something thinner, maybe 5. But I just need to make sure that I draw whatever shape I want to draw after I change those settings. Okay, so I have a circle with a thinner stroke. Okay. And then what if you want to change the color of the stroke? You use a function that's called stroke, and again, all same format: stroke, parenthesis, semicolon, and put whatever you want inside of stroke in between parentheses. So let's say I want it to be red. Again, I can use quotes and put red. Okay. So now something interesting happened. Actually, everything becomes red, not just a circle. Anyone knows why? Okay. So I actually didn't explain how draw and setup. That's actually one of the difference between draw and setup. Okay. So if I cut all the code here and paste it in setup, only the circle is red. However, in draw, everything is red. And actually, if you look closely enough, when I first start running, it's black stroke, and then it's just that 1 millisecond, and it becomes red. It probably won't be able to catch that. What we can do is we can also specify the frame rate. Frame rate is the number of frames you display every second. So if I change frame rate to 1 second, basically every 1 second it will change it will update the frame. So let's run this again. So it's black, and after 1 second, it becomes red. So why? That's because draw setup runs only once. So once you get everything ready, that's there, and it doesn't change. But draw, because draw is like a very active motion where you keep drawing and doing things. So draw essentially, in order for us to create things that can change, later we might do animation. The draw actually runs multiple times essentially. So the frame rate by default is somewhere around 30 to 60. So if the frame rate is 30, that means you will redraw every second you will redraw 30 times. Okay, so that's how you will be able to create animation later. So essentially, the draw doesn't run just once; it keeps running and running and running. And because of that, the very first frame, it will draw as we expect: two black point and 1 red circle, and then from the next frame, because you already changed stroke to red. And then all the, that's why all the point also becomes red. Okay? Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. So if you do want to, basically, if you want to make sure that your point is black, what you can do is, or, whatever specific color that you specify is, you add another, stroke function before you draw the point and set it to black, which would be 0. Okay? So now even if I change frame rate back to 30, it will stay as black, because every time. So what's happening here is it will draw the background, set the stroke, and then the stroke color and the stroke weight, and draw the point and do all this. After that, it's done once, and then coming back another time, draw the background, draw the stroke, change the stroke setting, and draw the point, and so on and so forth. Okay? Yes?
Why don't you see the shapes pop up in the same way? Why doesn't the geometry work the same way as the color?
Can you? Yeah.
When you hit play, all
Yeah.
of the geometry is there.
Yeah.
But the color changes.
Okay.
As it goes back.
Right? Yeah.
Why don't you see dot, point, circle?
Why don't we see the procedure? That's just because it's really, really fast. So, not just because it's fast, it's because essentially internally, it will only display after all the process is done. So every frame is they prepare each frame. Whenever that entire frame is ready, then it will display that entire frame to the screen. So you won't actually see the process. Okay? And also, again, going back to how usually runs at 30 or 60 frames per second, then even if there is that process, you probably won't be able to see. But it actually get everything ready before it shows to you. Yeah.
Yeah, just to clarify, so is it the case that for each frame that it runs the draw function once?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So for each frame, it run the draw function, and also it will basically finish running the draw function before it actually before the computer actually show that frame to you, and then does that like 30 or 60 times per second. So in the end, if you have something that keep changing location, it will look like they're moving. That's a question.
Why do we have white inside the
Okay, so that's the default values. So earlier, even though I didn't set the stroke color, it's black. That's just by default, the stroke is black, the fill is white. Okay, so we can change that. If I want to fill to a different color, guess what? The function is called fill. So fill, and then whatever color you want. Again, I'll just be lazy and use the name color. I'll say blue, and then the circle is filled with blue. Okay, and also, additionally, you can also remove, basically have transparent or no fill. So I'll write no fill. Yeah, no fill, we really don't need any values inside. It just says turn fill off. Again, only for the rest of the drawing. This time, let's draw a rectangle. Okay, so rectangle. First, I need the location. I'll put it at 300, 300. And then it actually needs a width and height. So I'll put maybe like 50 and 80. Okay, so I have a rectangle that's at the bottom right. Okay, and it doesn't have any fill. So whatever background color is there, you are seeing the background color. Okay. And what other shapes do people want to draw? Yeah.
Monkey.
A monkey. Okay, that will be actually the first exercise. So we will learn how to draw those simple shapes. It will be your job to actually draw a monkey or anything you want to draw, or a portrait or whatever. Okay, and also similarly with no stroke, you can also do similar to no fill, you can also do no stroke. And then I'll draw another rectangle. So maybe at 100, 300, width 100, height 50. Okay. And because I turn off both fill and stroke, so I actually cannot see it. So I do need to add some kind of fill. Maybe I'll do like a gray 200. That's too bright. 100. So you can see that it's right there. And also, personally, I really don't like harsh edges. I like rounded corners. So you have the option to do that. So after the width and height, you can do 10. So that would be the rounded corner, the radius of the corner. Okay, so you have rounded corner rectangle. And how do I know all of that? You don't have to memorize all that. I was like, oh, there's like, basically with rectangle, you just have 5 different numbers. How do I remember? Oh, which one is position? That's where you can use the reference. Okay, and for any program language or library you might learn, you might want to learn, there's usually like some form of documentation where you can read and try to learn how everything works. So let's see, maybe let's just search rectangle. So if I search rectangle, you see rectangle is there. I click on rectangle. It shows these examples, by the way, are interactive. P5.js, so you can literally click on edit and try to change. So this is an example. If I click edit, I change 55 to 10 and run. This example actually updates. So this is really helpful when you are learning how this thing works. Okay, the workshop is an hour and a half. It's impossible for me to demonstrate absolutely every single function. So that you can even specify which corner is rounded or what radius is for the radius for each corner. Okay, and then there's a short description. So I'll show you how you can read the sort of the syntax here. So in P5.js, everything that's in brackets, so in square brackets, that's saying that these are optional. Okay, so in this case we are drawing rectangle, so you can the least number of at least a number of parameters you need is the position x and y and the width. So if you leave out the height, it will just draw a square. Okay, and then you can add the height and then the corner for top left, top right, bottom left, the radius for each corner. And again, if you just put one value for the corner, it will apply to all of the corners. Okay, you see how some of them says optional. Yes, question?
So the x and y that we're giving, it's the top left corner of the shape, right?
Yes, exactly. So there's different. There's what's called the rect mode by default when you are specifying the position at x and y. It's referring to the top left. Let's see, yeah. So it's the location of the top left corner. However, there's something called direct mode where you can change how it behaves, because sometimes you want to use center. So there's different modes. There's this corners, which is I think is the default. And then there's a center. So if you change rect mode to center, you literally type, where's my code? Literally type rect mode center, and then draw another rectangle. Okay. So 100, 300, 150. So I draw exact same. So the rectangle is exactly the same. I'll change no fill and change stroke to black. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, again, I think similar thing happened. It was draw at different location. However, after starting from the second frame, it's changed. The rect mode changed to center for everything. So I'll use rect mode. The default, I believe, is corners. Okay, maybe it is not corners. Which one is the default? All right, one, it's corner, not corner. So corner meaning the left, top left corner, okay? So now with two different rect mode, I draw the rect code, the code to draw the rectangle is exactly, it's here, exactly the same. But because of the different mode, it's drawing at different location. Because one is specifying the top left corner, the other one is specifying the center. Okay? And similarly, you can change, there's rect mode, there's ellipse mode. So ellipse is when you don't want to draw a circle like an oval shape. You can specify the height and width. And there's ellipse mode. And there's mode for many different things that, again, you can look up. Okay? So now we know how to draw some basic shapes. And in reference, you can see there's some other shapes that you can draw. Okay? So there's something called, shape, there's arc, line, point, quad, there's many different things you want to draw. You can even draw curves, but that's a little more complicated. But with all this, basically you have the power of, like a pencil in real life. So I'll give you maybe 5 minutes to draw anything that you like. Usually we start with something like a portrait. But it can be just a simple portrait or just a happy face, whatever you like. Okay. So one thing I forgot to mention is if you know that you are just drawing something, you are drawing like creating something that's still, you are not planning to make it move. In those cases, you can write all your code in setup. And that way, you don't need to worry about, how come like whatever that I demonstrated, where once I changed what did I change? Like the color, it changed the color for everything. So you don't need to worry about that in setup, because setup is only run once, okay? If you are only interested, if you are for that specific project, you just want to create something still, you can simply write everything in setup and not worry about the loop thing, okay? And loop and draw is where you will be creating stuff that moves. This is what I just wrote. A few circles, some rectangles, and there's also another version that I prepared beforehand. Where is that? Okay. Yeah. So yeah, this one has a nose. Yeah. So all this, yeah. I'll send an email to everyone. So so that if you're interested in see, the code, if you're interested in looking at the code, reading the code, that's you can. And so far, all the code, all the positions we were using, we've been using numbers. So 200, for instance, yeah, circle 200, 200, all this. And actually, besides numbers, you can also use variables. Okay, and let me start a new sketch. Okay, so nothing right here. So this time we do have to write inside of draw. So I'll draw a circle. Okay, so position instead of so variables, there are variables that you can define, but also there are some built-in variables from P5. So for instance, there's a variable that called mouse x. The x is uppercase, and then mouse y. So I'm drawing a circle as the mouse x and mouse y, and then the diameter would be 50. Okay. So now it looks like, yeah, it's on top left. That's just the default mouse position. And now if I move my mouse, you can actually see this circle moving with my mouse. Okay, and remember, this is happening because it's drawing a new circle, drawing both the new circle and also the background. It's drawing a background and drawing a circle for 30 or 60 times every second. That's why it looks like the circle is moving. However, if I turn off the background, like if I delete it, you'll see that it actually leaves a trace. Okay, and that's because right now we are not the background. All the background. I mean, it's called background, but technically it's basically painting over the entire canvas to cover up the previous drawing. So now without the background, as you move around, all the circles that you draw in, all the frames will be left on the screen. Okay, and that's already something kind of interesting. Yeah. So that's without background. And also another thing is, so earlier I deleted, and now if I want to bring it back, I can undo my deletion. But also sometimes you might want to temporarily remove some code or disable some of the code. You can use a double slash, and that's called that's for comments. So writing code, same as when you are writing a document, a Word document, sometimes you might want to add comments just to remind, you don't want it to show up on the final product or final result, but you do want to put some notes for yourself. If you want to do that in code, each code, different kind of language has different comment style. In JavaScript or P5.js, if you want to write some comment, you do double slash. So essentially, you write double slash and then whatever comments you want. So this is just a note for yourself, and this will not affect the code at all. Okay, and so with that in mind, sometimes if I want to temporarily disable background, right now this is with background, I add double slash without background. So that will, what's called the comment is out. That means now this background becomes comment, so it's not really active anymore. And then we can, there's also shortcut, and on Mac is command slash shortcut turn it on and off. Okay, so you can temporarily turn off something. Okay, so besides mouse X, mouse Y, there's also a very handy. Let's keep the background. Handy built-in variable that's called width and height. Okay, so right now, if I want, let me try to draw another circle. If I want to draw a circle at center, I know the canvas is 400, 400, and I want to draw something at the center. I'll put, I miss diameter. So I'll draw it at the center. So 200, 200, and the radius, the diameter is 100. However, if I change the canvas size to 300, 300, it's not in the center anymore. Okay, so how can you make it always in the center? Okay, that's with a variable called width. So I draw another circle. So width essentially is a variable that gives you the value of the width of the canvas. So right now width would be 400. I wanted to divide it by 2, which is the center, and then height divided by 2 would be the center. And then maybe I'll make it slightly smaller, 50. Okay. So now it looks like both of the circles are in the center. However, if I change the canvas size, the small circle stayed in the center, and the large circle is still at 200, 200. Okay, so this is actually, it seems really simple, but this is actually something really powerful, because then you can make everything, all the circles, you can also make the sizes, react to the size of the canvas. So maybe, okay, so now the diameter of the circle is always 1/10 of the width. Okay, so if I make the width smaller, the circle also becomes smaller. If I change the width to 100, the circle always becomes smaller. Okay, and then can I make it larger, become larger? Okay, so that's useful when you want to, if you make a design with, instead of using what's called magic numbers. So 200 is magic number because it's a fixed number. But if you use this kind of variables, in the end, you have a pattern or whatever design that actually react to the size of the canvas. So maybe when you're experimenting, you're creating something that's 400 by 400, but when your work is finished, you maybe want to print. So you might want thousands of pixels width and height, or maybe you want to display on a larger screen. In these scenarios, if you use the magic numbers, you have to rewrite everything. Okay, like everything is misplaced once you change the size. However, if you made sure that everything is in relative to the width and height, then it will be responsive to the width and height. Okay, so that's something that can be really useful. And one other thing is so mouse X, mouse Y. Okay. One other thing that's really useful is print. Okay. So print refers to printing or displaying something on the computer or a console. So this is also something that's not really for the end result. This is just during the process of development, or as you are working with this project. Sometimes, for instance, right now I'm moving my mouse around, but I don't know what the coordinate is, so I can print out the coordinate. So print mouse X and mouse Y. If I run this, as I move around the canvas, you can see that inside of console, which we haven't been using, it actually displays the current mouse position, the X and Y. And now you can use that. Okay, so mouse position is 61, 184. So I'm going to use that number to draw a circle that's exactly at the same spot as where my mouse is right now. So circle 61 and 184. 61 and 184. Okay, and 30. So that's exactly where my mouse was. Okay, but sometimes it's annoying that it's keep printing, it keeps displaying more numbers. So there's also a function that so far we've been using setup and draw. There's also, we can add additional functions. Again, this is a built-in function supported by P5.js function, and mouse clicked. Again, remember the camel case, C is uppercase, mouse clicked, and parentheses, and then the curly braces. Okay, the curly braces is the same as the square brackets. You just need to press the shift key. Okay, for those of you who don't write code a lot, you might have a hard time finding that key. Okay, so Mouse clicked. So anything you put in this function, it will only run if you click the mouse. Okay, so if I move the print from draw, as we mentioned before, draw will keep running and running and running. If I put in mouse clicked, as I move this around, you actually don't see anything in the console. Now if I click, you actually see 2 numbers from the console. Okay, and obviously this can also be used for any kind of interaction, such as a coordinate that I showed earlier. If I click, you actually put a dot on the screen. Okay. Right now, just whenever you click, it shows the coordinate. So that's the kind of thing that you can use to add interaction. Okay. And yes.
When you were like drawing on a paper, you have a scale, so you know where to put the eyes or nose. You know the like sizes and everything. But when you were like drawing here, so how do you know like what would be the size, width, length?
Okay, so if you have very specific thing you want to draw, I recommend drawing that on a piece of paper first. And then essentially, yeah, you sort of need that. You do need to sort of do that math to see, yeah, where that is. And, you know, with paper, you actually need to redraw, but on code, you can just keep changing the code. So it's a lot of trial and error. If it looks like it's a little bit off, you can move it to a side a little bit. And also, as I just demonstrated with this mouse click and print the mouse position. So let's say I want to draw eye right here. You can use the mouse to decide, okay, this is where I want to draw that out. And then click, you can take that position and use that position to draw that circle, if that helps. Okay, yeah. And that, obviously, that's to use code to draw. But we can also write something that, you know, something like the Microsoft Paint where you can actually draw with your mouse. If that's something you're interested in, let's start. Let me name this one. Oops, workshop. This is relative positions, and I'll create a new one. So again, that function, I misspelled it, function mouse clicked. So whenever I click the mouse, I want to draw a circle. Add the mouse X, mouse Y, and with a diameter of 50, so it's large. Okay. So now if I click, it draws a circle, but for a very brief period of time. And that's because, as we mentioned before, draw keeps running. Mouse click only run once when you click, but draw keeps running, so the background keep covering up what you draw. So what you can do, you can, you know, comment out the background so that it's not drawing any background. Or maybe, yeah, maybe we do want to start with some kind of background. So, okay, let me just move this background to setup so that we start with a sort of light gray background. And then if I click, it draws a circle. I click another time, draw another circle. Yeah. This time it stays. That's because I'm not drawing any background to cover up the circle that I draw. This way, you can manually sort of draw whatever you want to draw. Okay, but of course, this will not be saved, because if you want to save the design, then that code will be a little more complicated. Okay, but right now, whatever you draw, if you really love it, take a screenshot and print it out, put it, you know, frame it, put it up in your living room. But once you refresh, once you run the code again, it all disappears. Okay. Yeah, there's basically, yeah, you were just drawing on the canvas and there's not really a way to save it. I think I don't really use it often, but I think there's a way you can just save with the code to save out the entire frame as image. But other than that, yeah, so with this kind of drawing, it's just kind of like one-time thing. Yes?
When we have a background inside the function draw, why does it cover the other circles?
Okay, so background, it's named background, but essentially it's the same as if you draw a rectangle around the entire canvas. Okay? And the difference between draw and the mouse click is draw keeps running. Mouse click run once whenever you click. So with background in here, again, this is easier to understand if you have very low frame rate 1. So I click, it draws a circle, but after 1 second, this draw will run and will cover up the circle that I draw. Okay, and that is why. So with this type of thing, you want to turn off the background. Okay. Oops, let me save this. And what did I do? Or draw circles. Okay. So I did write a thing. Actually didn't really need to use like a. Oh, I see. Okay. So finally, I think we have about 10 minutes. Let's actually get to making something that moves on its own. Okay, exciting, right? We've been doing stills, and finally, how can we make something move? Okay. Again, I'm really not being very creative today, so I'm just gonna start with a circle. But this time, instead of drawing a circle like before, this time I'll use a variable and I'll create my own variable. Okay. When you create a variable that you want to use throughout the project, you want to create it at the very beginning, like before both of the functions. So to create a variable, use a keyword called let. Let, let's say maybe x equals to 100, and let y equals to 200. Okay, so you are defining two variables, x, which has a value of 100, and the variable y with a value of 200. And now I want to draw this circle based on that location. I can actually even one step further, d for diameter 100. Okay, so now I can draw a circle at position x and position y and with diameter d. Okay, so now it's fixed. It's fixed there. Okay, but the difference is now that we have a variable, we can change the value. They're called variables because they varies. They change its values. So let's say every frame you want the circle to move to the right, which means the x value should increase. So x equals to x plus 1. That means every time draw runs, it will increase by 1. So now we have a moving circle. Okay? And remember, it always draw the background. That's why, yeah, let's draw the background first and draw the circle so it's moving. Okay? Now it moves off to the screen. Like, yeah, we don't want that. So that's one way to do it, to make the circle move. So we can use conditionals to make sure that when it touches the screen, it comes back. But today I like to try a different method instead of doing that. There's also another variable that's called a built-in variable. It's called frame count. So frame count. Let's actually print it out first. Frame count. This is where it can be useful to help you understand. So you can see at the console, frame count is a number that keeps increasing. So frame count refers to the number of frames that has basically the current, because there's like multiple frames per every second. The frame count will give you the current number of frames. Okay, so first to start with 1 and 2 and 3, and so essentially it's really useful because it's a number that keeps increasing, which is what we want. Okay, and then we want to use this variable to get a number that increases and also decreases. Okay, So what we can do is we can put in the sign inside of a sign. Okay. So, sorry.
Is it like the graph? People who watch it?
Yeah. So if you look here, if I put it inside of sign, so this is where I'll use. Let me use the sort of whiteboard that I created. Since we are not on Zoom today, but I do have P5, so I can have a whiteboard right here. So let's see. Okay, excuse my hand and like my non-straight lines because of the trackpad. So this is the regular coordinates. Okay, so with a sine wave, I believe I drilled that too low. So with a sine wave, that looks something like this. Okay, so essentially, as the x value increases, x value is the value that you put inside of the parentheses. So as the x value increases, x value keep increasing, but the sort of the input keep increasing. The output actually goes to +1. This is 1 to +1 to -1, +1, -1. So it actually keep changing. But you always get a number between -1 and 1, which is really good because that way, whatever we are moving does not leave the screen. So back to the thing. So print value, you can see that number is sometimes 0, sometimes -0, because that's that's the current sort of output. But -1, 1, that's like too little. So we can increase. We can increase sort of the value, maybe times 100. So now you see a value that's all the way from 100 to -100 and keep changing. Okay, but how do we use this to move the circle? Okay, I'm gonna cut this. I'll copy this and add it to the x value. Okay. So now instead of the regular x, we have x plus this value. Okay, so it starts moving, and it's moving too fast. How can I slow it down? After the frame rate divided by maybe 10. So now it's a circle that moves a little bit slower. Okay. Also, I can change x to the center of the screen, so it's all okay. So now we have a circle that moves left and right. Okay, does this make sense? I think there's a little bit of math here. I don't know if people are following this part. Yeah, with a sine function, essentially you give an input which keep changing, keep increasing, and the output will be a value from the 1 and -1, and now we multiplied by 100, so it's always from -100 to 100. Okay, so that's why it's moving the circle to the left and to the right. Okay, and what's even better, if I add this to the y as well, you'll see it moves diagonally. However, if you change sine to cosine, guess what will happen? Yes, it rotates it's a circle, and that's that's sort of the beauty of math to me. Yeah. Okay. I think we have 2 more minutes. I think that's pretty much everything that I like to cover for today's workshop. And in the next workshop, we would be learning how to use for loops and to create repetition of things. But with repetition, then you can create different gradient of color, because right now it's all solid color. But when you have repetition, you can create a gradient of color and other different kind of patterns. Okay, and so thank you all for coming to the workshop. If you have questions, feel free to stick around, and you can either ask right now or you can ask later when Okay. Yes.
My code, it's like in the side and it's moving at the side, but your one is like at the center, it's moving at the center.
So that depends on your x and y value. So essentially, x and y define the center. So right now it's 200, 200, so it's a center. If I move this x to 100, it will be, to the left. And also, let's turn off the background, and we'll see something a little more interesting. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but this is also how repetition can really change. It was just a moving circle, but now with repetition, it looks, yeah. And let's just add a little more fun. Add the fill color. Same thing I'm going to use the sign. So I'm going to use sign for the fill, but because I need a value between 0 and 255, I'll do a little bit math. So it's 178 plus 177 times sign, so it's going to be anywhere from 1 to 255. Okay, frame count, and let's see what happens. So now it's different gray, and we can also just duplicate this so it's RGB. I can slightly change the value, divided by 10, divided by 9, divided by 8, and you'll see colorful stuff. Okay.
So
Yeah.
where do we export this video or
So this, the easiest thing is to do a screenshot, or screenshot, or screen recording. There is a library, JavaScript library called CCapture.js. So this does require a little bit setup and more coding. So, but they do have a documentation to show you how to do that. The workshop is done, so feel free to leave if you, feel free to leave. But unless you have questions.
I have a similar question.
Yeah.
Someone asked it, I couldn't hear an answer. If I want to create a website and I want to have this kind of animation in the homepage, I just have to copy the JavaScript from here to the JavaScript file, or
It's a little more complicated than that, but we can take a look here. We've only been working with sketch.js, but essentially it's 3 files. We have index.html, CSS. CSS is just a placement of canvas, so it doesn't really matter. Index.html, first you want to include the P5 library. So you want to include that. And then this also includes a sound library, but we didn't do anything with the sound, so that's fine. And then inside a body, you need to create a min tag, which is where your canvas will be. So a tab that called min, and also you need to include sketch. Okay. Again, all this you can find on the P5.js library. If that's that's what, like the exact instructions, you can find it on their website. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Cool. Yeah. Thank you again for coming. I hope to see you next Tuesday. Yeah. Thank you.